Hello, this is Wake Up Call with Karina, and we are here at the Crystal Shrine today. And I hope you've all been well. I was kind of blown out yesterday. Ugh. We'll talk about that a little bit later, maybe. Anyway, there's a lot going on. Too bad the news is boring, right? Oh my gosh. So today's conversation is a reminder and a wake-up call about selfishness and ethics, personal ethics. So let's tackle the ethics part first. So I had a reading today, and that's part of why this conversation came up. So personal ethics. So there's a requirement of us to feel whole about our choices. I talk a lot about confidence, and confidence is absolutely necessary. The other side of confidence is self-trust and personal ethics. And it isn't unfamiliar to hold yourself in shame for choices or bad decisions or whatever, especially if they affected somebody else. However, at some point, it's important to let that go, refresh, reboot, and start again, which is why self-care comes in. So the personal ethics part is the understanding that we are constantly shifting our thoughts about what we think and feel about certain topics, our lives, our relationships, our actions, etc. At least that's the goal. Because if we really want human evolution, that's a must. Okay? We can't get stuck in a sheep mentality, just being part of the flock, right? Part of the status quo. For one reason, because that's typically comes to a head at midlife crisis at some point, and the poop's going to hit the fan eventually. If we're just kind of lemmings going along, not really having our own thoughts or feelings about things. So the other side of that is the requirement of validation. We all, as humans, need other people to say, hey, you're doing a good job. That's kind of how we're raised, right? It's how we're taught to know that we're on track, we're doing well, or approved of, etc. And in the points in our lives, there are times where we want to buck the system. This is what adolescence is all about. And there are times when we need to know that we fit in. That changes all the time, all the time. When you're in a personal growth and you're holding up an understanding of your own personal ethics, you may lose relationships, you may let go of people in your life that have been around for a really long time because they don't fit, match, or agree with your life. All growing pains and all necessary for growth to happen. So the other side of personal ethics is, and validation is, you may not get it. You may not get validation for a decision you're making, or a choice, direction that you're going to take on your journey of your life. You may not get it at all from anybody. So here's the thing. You don't have to. You really don't have to. It only becomes really, really, really a problem when we hold anger and judgment that other people are not validating us. So that's really where the caution lies. So pay attention to how much validation you're asking for. I always joke, I don't know if I've said it out loud. I think I've said it out loud, but in my work and in my practice, the most difficult thing is because I come up against people's self-trust. It is not unfamiliar for the client then to go to everybody in their life, including their manicurist and hairdresser, to ask them their opinion about their life. So that's really frustrating. But it's also sort of what we're used to doing. So when you're making a big shift, contain yourself. Don't ask everybody their opinion, because you don't even know what you're necessarily considering, and so all the input will just scramble you more and maybe cause more anxiety. If you have anxiety, you're not going to make steps towards what you're listening or considering doing. So the suggestion then at that point is go to a few people of different backgrounds to get input, but not to make a decision for you, okay? Just for input. And keep your mouth shut and just listen. Ask questions that are less looking for answers for yourself, but more looking for information, kind of doing research, like if you were doing a research paper or an interview about a topic or something. As little emotional attachment that you can have in that conversation, the better. Okay? So that's personal ethics. So now let's go to the selfishness part. So I'm thinking back on the session and what it was that was important to talk about. There are times when we all make mistakes. Mistakes are good. Even though they don't feel good, they are good. And they're good especially if you learn from them, right? They're good if you reflect back and make decisions about them. If you try to push them under the rug and forget about them, they're always going to come and bite you in the butt. Always. At some point. So, how do we come back from a time that we're feeling shame about something we did? What's important is to remove the blame from other people, because that's what we tend to like to do. We blame someone else so that we feel like we were out of control because of something. And of course, it depends on the situation. But let's just, in general, okay? Remove the blame and see what part of it you contributed to and what you could make different. If there's an element that you could have changed and could change in the future, whether that was a reaction, an inability to react, physical weakness, whatever it might be, see what you can do to learn and gain some information, knowledge, go train, whatever that might be, so that you have a different response to the next time a similar situation happens. Selfishness has two sides, as every emotion does. For example, anger has a positive attribute as well as its what we call shadow attribute. Selfishness also can have its positive attribute and its shadow attribute. So in the shadow, selfishness, if there is disregard to other people, if there is blatant harm, obviously, that's kind of the shadow side. And it can be a little more subtle, doesn't have to be dramatic, but there's a component of disregarding somebody else's needs or somebody else's effect to a decision that you've made. For example, if there's a young mom, couple kids, and a husband, and she decides she needs to get up and go away for about 3 weeks, and leaves the husband to do and fend for himself completely and totally without any prepare, that's more of a shadow side of selfishness. Okay, maybe that helps understand where I'm coming, what I'm hearing. The positive side of selfishness is self-care. Okay, self-care is when you're overwhelmed and you know you need time away. You get that time away within a partnership of whomever is in your life that you need to get a partnership with. Taking the exercise class that you know is beneficial for you, right? That's self-care. And doing it out of self-care as an intention versus doing it out of have-tos. Have-tos are not self-care. Shoulds are not self-care. Okay? Those are obligations. Very different. So self-care is if you hear of a class that you're interested in. I did this last week. I needed to do some self-care, and I felt like this class was the best way to go, and it was great. Self-care could be going out to dinner by yourself, right? So these are ways of doing self-care. When we have a goal to self-care, sometimes our old baggage will get in the way. And this is where we need to negate some of our bad decisions. Our regrets. Okay? Regrets suck. They suck. They suck the life out of our energy. They suck the life out of our hearts. They suck the life out of our brain and our guts. You know, we need all these things to work well to have a healthy life. So if you're having regrets and that gets in the way of self-care, here's some things you can do. Processing can look in different ways. It has to make sense for you. But the release is important. Now, the release may have to be done gradually, meaning you'll have to do the process a few times. Sometimes it's just all in one. It kind of depends on what it is and who you are. So the release and the release of regret can be something like writing down what you regret and see if you can answer the why to those regrets. Like, why did you make those decisions? And if you don't have an answer to that, when you get done with writing them all down, look and see if there's something common. If the commonality is that you felt out of control, see if you're blaming yourself. If you're blaming somebody else. If you're holding resentment or regret towards somebody else. There's all these steps and stages. You want to get to like the heart of what's going on, which is really the basis of my work. The goal is to get to the heart of the topic. And generally those topics recirculate and recirculate and recirculate. Doesn't matter the subject, they just keep recirculating these issues. So you can write them down. See if you can answer the why or the reasoning because of money, whatever, okay? And then look at it. Really take a moment to, to understand a pattern or a deficiency in yourself. That way you have something to work on. You have something to work towards. If you just have general resentment and general problems and you have no resolve, you're going to make yourself sick. 30 years, I've seen it. 35 years, I've seen it. Okay? It will land somewhere. I promise you. And I don't want that to happen. This is why these sessions are called wake-up calls. Not just for you, but also for me as a personal reminder, because the information that I get is for all of us, and I want to share it. Okay? So have that process, write it down. Once you're done writing it down and you look through it, then you can, across the top in a very bold marker, say, I get it, I'm done. And burn it. Okay? Now, there's a couple ways you can burn it. You can either carefully and safely burn it in a fireplace, burn it in a metal bowl somewhere outside. You can also fold it up, put it under a blessing candle. It's one, a candle of any sorts actually. And let the candle burn down all the way. Do your best not to have to interrupt the candle. So it has to be safe, has to be secure, watch out for pets, all that stuff, right? So that's definitely one way to do it. Another way to do it would be, I typically think of artistic ways of doing it. Let me see another way. So that's a little bit more mental. Artistic way to do it, if you'd like to doodle, would be to make a shape of a body, right, the arms and the legs, and that's you. And you say, where am I holding all this stuff? What do my insides feel like when I think about this? And you color in whatever area. Don't think about it too much. Just make it more intuitive, automatic, right? What colors do I feel like when I have those feelings of regrets in my mind, in my body? And study that and take a look and see, is that symbolize something going on in your body already, right? So you know where you're holding it. All this information is useful. When you're done with that, ask yourself, what is the purpose of me holding on to this? Holding on to my personal shame, holding on to my lack of forgiveness. What's the purpose? Because if you haven't let it go, it has a purpose, even if that's negative. Okay? That's the way the mind works. So, what is the purpose of me holding on to this? And am I ready to release it? Right? Am I ready to move on from this? Find out if there's any fears around that. If there are fears around that, then you have something to work with. Do you see where I'm going? Once you get something you can work with, then you work with it and get to an answer, get to a resolution. When you're done with those, and there's no time frame, however, be careful you don't linger. Because that's a function of not admitting that you're ready to let it go. Or admitting that you're not ready to let it go. Then you can also take that and exit out with the color that you would want to replace, a color that you would want to replace in that area. So it's taking a positive on top of a negative, right? To cancel it out and start fresh. So that's another way to do it. Depending upon what it is, some people need to do something more physical. I often suggest axe throwing. I often suggest pistol shooting. I often suggest a batting range, depends on the person, or just hitting a tennis ball in a court. Sometimes the physical aspects are required within the resolution of what's going on. And there's no right or wrong. You may need all three. Who knows? You may need more than three. Just be mindful of how much is moving versus how much you're keeping. All right. Yeah. And if you need more suggestions on ways that might work better for you, give me a call. I love nothing more than to come up with ways for helping people release their stuff. Okay. So I think that's it. So we talked about personal ethics. We talked about we didn't talk about self-approval, but it was kind of inherent in that seeking approval of other people, of your actions. You may not get them. And so it's necessary that you have your own approval. I've lived my life salmon upstream, my whole life, okay? And I'm grateful that I have some appreciation of people around me who allow that to happen. At the same time, no one will ever understand my process, your process. There is no box that everybody comes from, right? So asking for approval for your process is actually quite insulting to your process. Because then you're not learning your self-trust, right? You're not learning your self-confidence. You're not learning your self-determination. You're waiting for an answer that feels the safest. That may not be the point. So, there is a lot of courage that is required in self-processing. There is a lot of courage required in living in our life today. All the inputs, political, social, economical, biological, there are truths and there are lies within all those realms. With self-trust, you can decide how you want to live your life. Without self-trust, you're always going to feel vulnerable. That's kind of the nitty-gritty, okay? So, I want to support you with your self-trust and your self-determination. And I don't have to agree, even as a practitioner, I don't have to agree with the person that's in front of me. My job is to channel, give information and considerations of things that are blocking them supporting their own concepts, or that their concepts are actually being determined by some other influence. That's important to know. We grow up, we adopt things from our family, we adopt concepts and beliefs from our religious people in our lives, organizations, or school, or the one thing the first grade teacher said sets you up for life. All those things are possible. So it's our job, certainly once we're adults at 18, legal adults, to determine our own destiny, or determine our own beliefs from there on. You can't excuse yourself from that, and you cannot continue to blame other people when after 18 it's your choice how you want to do it, because at that point you can determine it, and they're all growth processes. So there's no end, there's no fantasy land of being done. There are pauses and there are breaths of processing, and there are moments of contentment, and then you do the next process, and that's the life. That's life. That's how it works, and that's how we evolve. So let's make it fun. Let's make it enjoyable. Let's get rid of this excess stuff, because this excess stuff makes us sick, and then we're vulnerable. And we're vulnerable to everything and anything that is going to suppress us more. So You gotta rev up and be stronger on all levels, especially right now. Okay, especially right now and for the rest of our lives. So again, it can be fun. It can be a pain in the butt, and it can also be fun. So I would rather take the fun side. I get the bum side a lot. I do the self-care so I can see the fun side again. Okay. So I'm in it with you, and it is what it is, and let's just figure out a way to enjoy our life within it. Okay. Have a great day. Oh, I want to do a quick card. Let's what we're going to do. I love these cards because they are non-traditional, and the Artist stack, which I love, and they really allow for me to hear the interpretations of how they fit. So let's see what it is. Learning. I know it's backwards for some of you, but learning. It's about learning. Always learning. I know I'm a professional student of life, of energy, of information. It's cool. It's not like regular school. It's fun. It's bizarre. It's quite challenging, but there's no tests. That's the fun part. And there's no grades. Yay! All right, be well. I will see you next week. If you have any input on this next question, please let me know. With the scare and the fear of being in public these days, I am thinking of doing a virtual workshop instead of an in-person workshop. Chime in if you have a thought. If you have a platform that you've used or that you liked, that you've had good experiences with, and we'll go from there. All right? Take care. Talk to you soon.